My name is Todd Warner, and this is Thomas Cameron to my left. I'm product manager for Satellite, there are two product managers. I hope some of you got a chance to go through the Satellite roadmap session just a little while ago with David Kaplan, my counterpart. This is going to be a very fast-paced session, but what we're doing is we're focusing on, well, first of all, how many of you have Satellite deployed right now? Everybody.
Wow.
Who does not have Satellite deployed right now? And you're just, you're red hatters.
No, he's not a red hatter.
All right, so, and I apologize if I get too loud, but what we're doing here is we're talking about Satellite 5, we're talking about Satellite 6, we're talking about transition between the two is part of the focus of this discussion, but another part is kind of, Thomas is going to dive into Satellite 6 and give you a kind of a hands-on approach, exploratory look at it, as if you're a Satellite 5 customer looking at it for the first time. So we want to give you some context, but what I'm going to lead you through right now is just an overview of where we're going with Satellite as from a transition perspective. All right. So I don't want to talk too much about what Satellite is. This room, obviously, you all know what it is. But it's, both Satellite 5 and Satellite 6 are focused on similar ideas, similar concepts, similar use cases. Satellite 6 is positioned to take that much further into the future. But just like Satellite 5, if you're a Satellite 5 user, it's all about workloads on top of a build, marching through a lifecycle process, and then ultimately managing those systems, both deploying them and runtime managing them over time. As you all know, there's a bunch of functionality embedded in Satellite. You may or may not be taking advantage of all of it. But as we built Satellite 6, the next generation technology coming out later this year, it's the same stuff: provisioning, configuration, patching, deploying, workflow, automation, reporting, auditing. The one thing that is going to be, as I've alerted folks to before, monitoring is going to be diminished as a feature within the product.
That was very politic. There's no more.
Monitoring's out for Satellite 6. We have recommendations if you want to examine those later. All right, so the use cases are the same. In fact, the Satellite 5 use cases informed the Satellite 6 use cases. Hence, the name is still Satellite. Those who are confused about what was Satellite in the past, we used to have this thing. We have a product called CloudForms. We were mashing the ideas of managing some of the very cloud-specific things with Satellite. Well, we split that out. Satellite 6 is that functionality we've been building for several years now. All right, so it's the same use cases, but we expanded and positioned really to expand into the future into the cloud use cases, working with CloudForms, working with OpenStack, et cetera. Much better configuration, significantly better lifecycle management. The provisioning is certainly a more modular approach, et cetera, et cetera. And Thomas will talk about that. You guys have, a lot of you have a lot of interesting topologies with Satellite. The ideas are the same. You're taking feeds from Red Hat and others through your firewall to an on-premise thing that is broadcasting out to end systems. And if you are federated with proxies, which I bet you most of you are, we have the same concept in Satellite 6 with what we're calling capsules, a much smarter model surrounding, or a much smarter proxy than current proxy. All right, so deliverables and timeframes, and then I'll kind of dig into what the process will look like. First off the bat, we're delivering documentation. Some of it's been on the back burner for some time. So some best practice guides, even with using Satellite 5. You guys will be working with Satellite 5, some of you, for years to come. We're rolling out a best practice guide for Satellite 5 and Satellite 6 that complement each other. In other words, using the product the same way. And then a transition guide that's informed by those documents that steps you through the process. So the transition guide will step you through that process. Transition, I have to inform all of you now, is going to be a side-by-side transition process. I know you got lots of questions about that. It cannot be an upgrade in place. It's too big a technology change. So the document will walk you through that, and then there will be tooling that will help eliminate some of the more mundane, pedestrian work that you need to do to migrate your object model from one to another. This is the timeline. We have a, if you all look online right now, it says 2017 for end of production for Satellite 5. We're extending it out to 2019. The reason for that is to give you guys plenty of time to look at Satellite 6, play with it, get comfortable with it, find a time that makes sense to transition to it. All right, high-level process. Like I said, it's side-by-side install. You have Satellite 5 deployed. You get 2 certificates or manifests. Before you say anything, we will have a process that if you, for example, purchased 1 satellite, we'll have a process in place to stand up that second satellite at no cost. So you deploy Satellite 6. I'm zooming in here a little bit. Organizations are almost identical between the products, so are the users, at least in concept. So you transition organizations, transition users, and we'll have tooling to help you do this as well, but this is a manual examination. But in Satellite 5, the users have a very simple RBAC model, and Satellite 6 much more complex. So the process will be get those users over there, and then worry about, and we'll help you with the process of mapping the current roles in Satellite 5 to Satellite 6, and then you can refine them. So orgs and users are easy in comparison to everything. So Satellite 5 clone channels. How many of you guys clone your channels? Everybody. A clone is a copy. And as you know, as soon as you clone it, that channel sort of lives independently all on its own. There are processes to examine one channel to another, but in Satellite 6, we're improving this dramatically with the concept of views, where you take an original channel, you add filters on top of it. Any photographers out there, just like a filter in a photograph, you never really change the original. You just change what you see of the original. So we're going to have a filter concept to develop views so that you can have many spins of a repository, yet the original repository marches forward unchanged. A really cool idea is that you can have views of views in Satellite 6. So, hey, as far as transition goes, this is a difference, right? This is a big change. So we have to, you're going to have to examine how you use channels and how you will use them in the future, but we will develop tooling to help you take a look at the channels and see how would they map into a view so that you can kind of normalize your stack of channels and repositories. And configuration works the same way, your configuration repos in Satellite 6. All right, so configuration. You're kind of going from a very templated key value pair, a model of configuration on Satellite 5. Satellite 6 is more of a recipe-based, if this, then that, dependency on X concept. And we are working on tooling to help translate that templating into Puppet language so that you guys can transition pretty readily. Ultimately, you have configuration channels, you have configuration repos in Satellite 6. All right. Lifecycle is a significant and very welcome change. So with Satellite 5, you have a labeling scheme. You essentially manage lifecycle through labeling mechanisms of channel. That's your dev channel, your test channel, your production channel, things like that. Or you have multiple satellites that do something similar. Well, in Satellite 6, we're introducing the concept of a library with chained environments. And those chained environments are labeled for that stage in life of stuff. It's a bucket, and you take and you throw you promote a view through a life cycle chain of environments, and you do that, and you have systems that are attached to those repositories in a very specific environment. And what that does is allow you to organize and manage what is in what you call dev much more sanely, succinctly, without this manual process of naming stuff. Much improvement. And you can have as many changes as you want. You can name them anything you want. All right, Kickstart, same ideas. What we're trying to do is take some of the more repeatable items and modularize them. So on the Satellite 6 side, you have a provisioning template and then as far as the views and whatnot, we call that a host group, a collection of views associated to a system. And then you're going to ultimately, you link those together, it's going to populate that template upon provision. So you can have one template and many of these host groups apply to them. But the activation keys, same idea, and we'll help you walk through that process as well. System groups are the same, essentially. They're groups of things, groups of systems on a search key, essentially. All right, so same concept, more power. Like I mentioned, capsules. I should have put this in the beginning. Capsules are essentially the same idea as proxy, except that it can actually do more smarter things. That capsule can live a little bit without connection to satellite, and it's mirroring content versus caching it. It has a puppet master on there, et cetera, et cetera. Lots more smarts in the capsule, but it's the same concept when you're federating over disparate networks. And then ultimately, when you're looking at machines, the process, once you get this in place, you want to test some machines, you want to move some machines over, you won't have to destroy them and then redeploy them. It'll be essentially a re-registration process to move them over. And of course, you'll move some machines over, you'll create some new machines that are new projects only in Satellite 6, and of course, some things are going to be legacy and die with that Satellite 5, I'm sure. And then ultimately, once those things roll over, you'll archive that. We'll have a process for you to archive that Satellite 5. All right, so in the trenches, Thomas is going to take it away and manage to give you a sneak peek of what it is.
All right, if you could swap over to my display, please. Thank you. So I wanted to talk about, for me anyway, when I want to learn a new technology, I generally want to go, okay, here's how I did it before. Here's how I did it in the old version. How do I do that in the new version? So that's really what I'm going to try to demo today. How many folks have seen my Satellite 5 Power User Tips and Tricks presentation? Right? Do you guys remember how many slides were in that? Some ridiculous amount, like 200 slides, right? So I was building a slide deck for Satellite 6, and when I hit 400, I went, nope. Nope, we're going to do a live demo. Sorry. So what I want to do is I want to talk about some of the basic things that you do every day with Satellite 5, and some of the things maybe that I want to show that we've listened to what you guys have told us about, hey, this is kludgy, or this is a hard process, this is difficult. So what we've done is we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that workflow and process makes sense in Satellite 6. Now, if you understand the underpinnings of Satellite 6, it's based on a bunch of technologies, but the two big ones are the Catello server and the Foreman. Now, anybody participate in the Managed Design Program, MDP, for Satellite? So not a whole lot, but if you played around with it, you know that with Satellite 6, the MDP, you had two interfaces. You had the Catello interface and the Foreman interface. It was kind of kludgy. So what we've done is post-MDP2, we've actually brought those together into a single UI. To be very clear, that's still a work in progress. There are some concepts that are similar terminology, but very different underlying technologies between Catello and the Foreman hosts. Yeah, a Catello host and a Foreman host are not the same thing. And so right now, some of the things that I'm going to show you are going to be a little bit kludgy. We're aware of it, and we're working on unification so that you just have to worry about a host definition, and we'll worry under the hood about what's going on. So when I talk to you about some of the things that we do here that it may look a little funky, bear with. We're getting better. All right, so let's talk about just some real basics. You know, when you look at installation of the system, it's very similar to what you did with Satellite 5, right? You want a very minimal installation. You want lots of memory. You want lots of disk space. We're going to do a lot of content synchronization. You're going to have a whole lot of storage requirements. As a for instance, with Satellite 5, the big important directory is var satellite. That's where all your content lived. In Satellite 6, it's going to be var lib pulp. So when you're building your box, you want to make sure that that's going to be either on its own partition or at least in an environment where you've got a ton of space. So you want to build it simply. It's all subscription manager now, folks. For those of you like me who have been clinging to RHN register with both hands, RHN Classic, get over it. You need to learn Subscription Manager. So you're going to register the system. You're going to run Subscription Manager register. You're going to connect to the appropriate repos. You're going to do the installation of the satellite server, and things almost immediately are going to get very different. When you installed Satellite 5, pretty much the first thing that you want to do is you want to go out and you want to get the XML formatted text document that is your satellite server, and then you got to break out to the command line, and you got to run satellite sync-c and figure out, get a big text file and figure out what channels you want to sync, and then satellite sync-l, and then satellite sync-c channel A, -c channel B, -c channel C, and if you typo anything, by the end of the day, you pretty much want to gouge your eyes out, right? So that's all gone. Let me show you how we do content synchronization now. I think it's actually very, very cool. So a couple of things.
Thomas, I forgot to ask, we were supposed to ask ahead of time. If you have any Q&A questions, you can enter that in on your phone. We also have survey in there that we would love you to use as well. But your Q&A, please enter it on the phone, and of course, raise your hand at the end of here.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to ask questions in the middle. I'll make something up. All right, so when you first get the machine up and running, it's installed, you've run the Conceptual installer, it's up and running, and so there's a couple of things that you're going to want to do, and let's talk about what those are. So when I get the system first up and running, the first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to register my subscriptions. So one thing that's very different about the way that we do subscription manifests with Satellite 6 versus Satellite 5 is, with Satellite 5, if you had 100 subscriptions, you got an XML document for 100 subscriptions. And we decremented those from RHN, we put them all into your satellite, and away you go. There were some times you could do jiggery-pokery to make that go away, but now it's very, very flexible. When you build your manifest and you actually get to define what goes in the manifest that populates a satellite server, you can say, hey, I'm going to have a satellite that's for 50 machines. So you can carve out 50 of your subscriptions, put it into the manifest, and download it and install it on your satellite. Let me show you what that looks like. It's very cool. It's very granular. So you go into the machine. It's a newly built machine. You go into Red Hat subscriptions. Oh, you got to set your context. Oh, this is something that's going to be fixed, right? Yeah. Okay. Because we have the ability to do multiple organizations. I've been bugging poor Mike. Mike McCune is one of the really amazing developers on the Satellite 6 team. The entire team has been phenomenal about helping to integrate requests from customers and to help poor little saps like me who are trying to figure this stuff out. Because Satellite has the ability of doing multiple organizations, by default, it comes up with no organization selected. So when you go to dig down into something, it goes, no, there's nothing there. So first time I saw that, I was like, I already broke it. But that's not the case. You just got to set your context. So I'm going to go in, and I'm going to choose the default organization, which is the Acme Corporation organization. You can rename that. You can delete that organization and come up with another one if you want to, but I just left it as the defaults. So I've already registered this satellite to Red Hat. And I've already imported a manifest. But if I were going to import another one, what I could do is go over here to Manage Manifests. And it's actually really simple. You go to redhat.com and you download your manifest. The slide deck, by the way, that has all those zillions of screenshots will be available to you guys when the summit is done. And it shows you step by step how to do it. But you can go and find your manifest, and it's actually really simple. You can just browse to it, click on it, upload it, and when you get done, that manifest will show the subscriptions that you have available in your environment. So it's super, super easy. It's very visible. You can see what's going on there. So you get your manifest up and running. You got all of the subscriptions that you have available. So it's really easy. You guys, anyone use the satellite subscription tool from the command line where you import the XML document? Anyone had that blow up on you? Yeah, those hands stayed up. This doesn't typically blow up. It actually works really, really nicely. So it's really good. So once you've done that, you're going to have a real clear picture of what your subscription counts look like on your machine. Then what you need to do is you need to go and synchronize content. So I'm going to go over here into content, and I'm going to go look at Red Hat repositories. This is a thing of beauty. How many folks have struggled with, I have a third-party application that says I absolutely positively have to be at 5.4, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5.4. And they won't support me if I go beyond that. And so what do you do with Satellite 5? With Satellite 5, you do a clone by date, and you got to figure stuff out, and you go and find a Wikipedia article that tells you when the release dates are, and you set the date, and it's painful. Well, what we've done is we have actually published the content for Red Hat Enterprise Linux to our content distribution network in version numbers. So if I dig down to Red Hat Enterprise Linux server, and I scroll down a little bit, and I want to look at the RPMs for it, check that out. I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but it is Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6.1. Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6.2, 6.3, 6.4. So the beauty of it is, yes, yes. This is huge. One of the biggest complaints that I have from customers is I need to be able to sync this up to exactly a version number. So this is huge. You can sync exactly the version that you want to sync. One thing to be aware of, if you sync 6.1, you will get everything that's in 6.1, including post 6.1 up to 6.2. That's something that's a little bit odd. You just need to be aware of it. It's still considered to be 6.1, right? Yeah, but be aware of that. So for instance, I just chose 2 channels. I chose the RPMs for RHEL x86 64, 6.5, and 6 server. And also 6.4, and that's grayed out because I've got a system that's registered to it, so I can't delete it. But a couple of things to be aware of. When you're synchronizing this content, you're going to choose the RPMs. That's the updates in errata and things like that. You're also going to choose, down below that, the kickstart trees. So if you want to be able to kickstart, this is something to be aware of. You've got to download the RPMs, and you also have to download the kickstart trees. Real easy. You checkbox it, and it downloads it. For giggles, I also chose the optional software, optional RPMs for 6.4, 6.5, and 6 server. So, and that's it. Once you're done with that, you've chosen these. You don't do anything else in this screen. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go up here to Content and go to Sync Plans. So you can set up a synchronization plan. So you go in a new sync plan, and I'll call it Nightly Sync. Give it a description if you want to. This is my nightly sync job. Give it an interval. So you can do hourly, please don't. Daily, weekly. And then you can give it a start date and give it a time. There is a bug right now. We're aware of it. It's going to be fixed soon-ish, where you set up a sync plan and you choose save, and it sets it for whatever time of the day it is you just set it for. It's really kind of weird. It won't do 2 a.m. yet. It's going to be fixed. So I've got a sync plan, and I go into that sync plan, and I say what products I want to synchronize. So I'm going to click on Add. By the way, I am doing this live on a virtual machine on my laptop without a net. So it could run really well, or you could see smoke pouring out of the back of my laptop. You just never know. So anyway, I'm going to go down and I'm going to choose whatever the product is that I want to synchronize. Red Hat Enterprise Linux Server. So I'll check on that, and I'll say Add Selected. And now that product has been added to sync. How much better is that than going and scripting some crazy satellite sync, cron job insanity? Super, super easy. So good stuff there. So once I've done that, once I've gotten my content synchronized, I can go back and check on my sync status. So if I click on sync status, it's going to show me, come on little laptop, chug, chug, chug. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Well, and here's what's also cool. I can go and expand this. Those are all the channels that I've got set up to sync to my laptop. I can selectively say, oh, wow, I need an update for 6.5 or whatever. So I can check that box and say sync now, and I can do one channel, or I can choose select all and do all of them. I can do it on demand, or I can do it on a schedule. So really cool work there by the satellite team. Well done. Then, once I have that content synced, I've got the content on my system. I need to make that content available to my machines. So let's talk about how we publish this content through content views. Sorry. So I'm going to go into content views, and you'll see that I already have some of them on here because Mike and I spent a lot of time working on some kind of magical stuff with content views. So when we're talking about doing content views, if I wanted to create a new content view and make this stuff available to internal customers, I'm not going to go all the way through this, or actually, yeah, I can. So I'll call this, I don't know, rel 6.4 stuff. So it'll automatically form the label. I can click on save. And now what I need to do is I need to add whatever it is to this content view that I want to add. So I'll scroll down and I'll say I'm going to do the 6.4 content for the optional, and I'll do 6.4 content kickstarts, 6.4 content for server RPMs. So I've got those 3 repositories. I will add those repositories to this content view. Now it's in there. And once I've got that in there, I'm going to publish the view. Now, let me break out of this for just a second to talk about where I'm going to publish this, to where I'm going to publish this. And I should have talked about this first. Sorry, I got this a little bit out of order. When I go and I look at my lifecycle environments, as Todd alluded to, how many folks have done the, okay, I've got the dev and the QA and the prod, and it's all this manual process where I want to clone them, and I'm probably, if I'm going to do it through the UI, I got to go and select all of them and then back out the ones that are newer than a date, or I got to do it from the command line. And it's just, it's kind of a painful process, right? So what we've done is we've actually set up lifecycle environment paths. By default, the content that you get from Red Hat. You know how in the Satellite 5 world, there were the base channels and the child channels that you got from Red Hat. And we typically recommended don't subscribe systems to those. That's just content that's coming from Red Hat. Take that content, clone it into dev. Take dev, clone it into QA. Take QA, clone it into production. But those were all manual processes, and you had to pay attention to what it's built in now. So now, if I want to do a new environment path, I click on this. It's going to start out with the library. The library is Red Hat stuff. You probably shouldn't mess with it. I mean, you can absolutely subscribe systems to it if you got a simple environment, but it's the workflow path is built in. So I'm going to say, let's say I'm going to build an environment that says I'm going to do web development. Wait, web dev. It'll automatically create the label for me. Click on save. Whoops. Yay, beta. Let me do this instead. So I'm going to click on there. Let's do web devel. No, it's not liking it. Cool. Gotta love live demos. Let me show you what I did previously. So what I did was I took from the library, I said from library I'm going into the development, and you notice that every time I do this I just click a plus sign and I can add additional environments to it. So I don't know what's going on there. We'll bang on it afterwards, but again, beta software, yes? Can you rearrange those environments? So you've got no. No. Add something to it, slide it in between. No. No. Do we even have any plans for doing that? Yeah. I mean,
yeah. So branching is in the future potentially.
Oh yeah,
et cetera. Yeah. Things like that. But right now it's straight one path, simple, get it right, and then we'll work on building out that workflow.
Yeah. So anyway, so having said that, let me go back into content views. So we've got our workflow, right? We've got our library to dev, dev to QA, QA to production. So I can go into my Rel 6 web servers content, and then I can click on, oops, wrong one. There we go, the Rel 6.4 stuff one, that's it. So now that I've got it, I want to publish it. When I publish it, it's going to write it to the library, because again, it's Red Hat content, it's going to go into the library first, and then you're going to put it into dev and QA and so on. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this because it does take a while to do publishing. But what winds up happening is, let me show you over here on the web servers component, I've already gone through the cycle where I published it to the library, and then I published it to development, to quality assurance, and to production. One of the cool things about this is if you were to go in, let's say that this was a Rel 4 based channel, but now I want to go to Rel 5. Not a problem. What I can do is I can go into content, go into repositories, I can choose add, and you notice that, well, let me go back. You notice that right now all the Rel 6.4 stuff is there. When I'm ready to roll this to 6.5, it's super easy. I go into add, and I find my 6.5 content, and I check the boxes and say, yes, we're going to go with 6.5. Click on add to the repository. And now, when I'm ready, I can publish this, and I will go ahead and hit the button on this. My machine will run a little bit slow after this, just because it's a little virtual machine. But so I go in and I'm going to publish a new version. Let me show you what happens. Version control on this, or version notification on this is actually really, really impressive. So the content view is updated. Come on, it's thinking. All right, so what happens is, there's version 1. It ought to refresh here in just a second. There we go. And it'll tell you, version 1 is still out there in development, QA, and production. But version 2 is being published to the library. So the beauty of it is you can see exactly where you are in your development cycle, in your software deployment and your software lifecycle management. So again, it's a thing of beauty.
Can you imagine how you're going to rev your repos this way? Those underlying repos are not changing. What's changing is your view of those repos and your versioning those views, and where they stay in your different environments.
Can you build triggers off of whenever you create the version stuff? You do additional tasks afterwards?
Well, everything that's in here can be done interactive with an API.
So the question was, as you're going through these processes, are there triggers that you can leverage to do different things? And right now, we do have APIs for all this stuff. So if you want to automate those kinds of things, you can, whether there's explicit trigger between the UI versus what goes on afterwards. Some of those things I'm sure are there, some of them are not. But there are APIs for everything from top to bottom. Plenty of APIs for all this stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's very different is with Satellite 5, when we built that family, when we designed that family back with Red Hat Advanced Server 2.1, right, back in the day, the design goal was figure out how to do something to one machine and then replicate that a whole bunch of times. The design goal with Satellite 6 has been from the ground up, scale. How do I do this on a very large scale? How do I replicate this a bazillion times? And so, the entire application, or I'm sorry, let me back up. Satellite 5, we plugged API access in much after it was invented because customers were asking for it. With Satellite 6, it's been built from the ground up to be totally exposed so that everything can be done programmatically from the command line through Python or whatever your favorite language is. It should be even more flexible than Satellite 5 was. Well, that sounds a really bold statement, doesn't it? Yeah, it should be even better than something we've been doing for 11 years really well.
Well, to be frank, when we started developing Satellite 6, it was, if we could do everything over again, how would we do it? And we took all those ideas and and said, okay, let's design it the way we want it, and that's what we've done. And here we are. So views is a perfect example of that. The way this syncs is a perfect example of that. So anyway, carry on.
Yeah. So this is going to run for a while. I'm not going to sit here and bore you guys watching a progress bar going across. But what winds up happening is once this stuff gets promoted out, then the content is available to systems which are registered. And I actually I'm going to break out into a slide deck here because this is kind of boring watching a progress bar. So let me talk to you about how that works. So we talked about client systems. I'll talk about registering the systems in a little, well, actually, I'll talk about registering the systems right now. So you register the systems very similar to, how in Satellite 5 we had to go get that RPM that had the SSL certificate so that you could use encrypted communications. Same kind of concept. You go to the pub directory of your Satellite 6 server and install the RPM there, the CA consumer RPM. Once you do that, you use Subscription Manager to register to the satellite server. No more RHN register. It's actually really simple syntax. Subscription Manager, register what organization you're going to connect to, what environment, library, dev, QA, or production, and then auto attach just says give me the appropriate channel access once I register. So you register, and sure enough, it comes back and it says, hey, you have been registered to the satellite server. You're good. Now, you can go to the web UI and set the correct content view so that the system will have access to the RHEL repositories. Or you can do it from the command line. But basically, you're going to go into hosts, go into registered systems, oops, and then change the content view dropdown. So as an example, right now, I do Subscription Manager repos list, and it's only registered to optional. Wait, what? That's weird. It's because the other one's not accessible to the content or to the environment that it's registered to. So now I'm going to go in, check registered systems, drill down to the hosts that just registered to the satellite server, and over here on the right-hand side, I can change the content view. So I can go from library to my view or to dev or whatever. And then also you can change the release version right above that. So you can actually lock it into 6.4 or 6.5 or whatever. So you want to set those values. You do Subscription Manager refresh on the machine, and it'll delete the old certificate, add the new certificates. And when you do, now I do Subscription Manager repos -- list. It's got the right repositories. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to walk before I run, though. Actually, I'm going to crawl a little while. And then
But yeah, so the concept of activation keys, eliminating a lot of these little steps and making it a hash that means this stuff, absolutely. The activation keys are there for that.
Yeah. So we do that. Now, don't be confused. The satellite tools that I use for Satellite 6 aren't yet in the content delivery network, so I had to do a third-party internal repository, don't freak out. But so anyway, I do yum repo list, and I see my Satellite 6 tools, along with, there's those server RPMs, so I'm connected to the correct repositories. Now, as a good rule of thumb, anytime, I don't care if it's Satellite 5 or Satellite 6, make sure that you update your yum bits just to make sure that you're getting the latest. And I also recommend that you update your subscription manager version as well, because we were doing a lot of new features there. So you do your yum update on those guys, they come up, you can navigate around the UI and start looking at things like what are the details for the system. So, and it's really granular. I mean, all the stuff that we had before in Satellite 5, that plus more. It's got a lot of good information about what's going on there. You can see, for instance, what the environment is that the system is in. You can see what channels it's subscribed to. You've got all the cool information around DMI decode. So, let me get this. Let me talk about what I'm talking about. So you can set the release version. You can set the content view. You can see what environment the system is registered to. And there's a ton of good information about when it was registered, what's going on with it, and so on. DMI decode output down there. I mean, it's insane the amount of information that you got there. There's a ton of good information about what the system is configured like.
And of course, it's all searchable and
yeah,
and
everything's searchable. I mean, it's just entries in the database, so you can do all kinds of cool stuff there. So you can also navigate around the UI to configure things like what subscriptions the system has. So on the system, you can navigate over to the subscriptions tab, and you can make changes to which one of those subscriptions that's part of your manifest that you've made available through the local satellite server. This is a manual process. You can set all this stuff through activation keys, but I just want to show you where this stuff exists. So now one thing to be aware of, this is common through almost all of the interfaces. You've got two tabs that'll list the existing setting, and then you can add anything that's available. So you list existing, and it's in the MDP subscription. That's why it automatically registers, and I didn't want that. So I scroll down, and I say, no, let me add in the Red Hat Enterprise Linux Server Premium one, and go from there. I can also use the UI to manage what system groups the machine is a member of. If you used system groups in Satellite 5, very, very similar concept in Satellite 6, except that we actually do some pretty cool things around search with system groups. So not only do you have unions and, just drew a total blank.
Intersections?
Thank you, unions and intersections, but also exclusions. So you can say, show me all the things that are not in this and this. So there's some pretty cool search functionality there. So similar to what we've done before. You can also take a look at what tasks have been performed. This is actually really, really helpful. If you're running jobs against your machines, you can look at the tasks and figure out where it hung or what happened. And then any events. I don't have any events because the machine is brand new. You can also navigate through and do things like do package updates, kind of like what you could do in Satellite 5, right? So that part of the transition is not going to be very painful. You can go through and figure out what updates are available. You can filter by name, all that kind of good stuff. And then you can also see what errata are available. And you can filter these, or you can sort them by, show me all the security advisories, bug fixes, you know, do searches for strings. It's actually very powerful.
How many of you have policies in place based on type of patch? Security versus enhancement versus bug?
Like security has to be updated within 30 days versus other stuff that can be, it's pretty common.
Heads. Okay.
It's pretty common,
Good.
yeah. So now I'm going to actually break out of the slide deck because I want to show you something else. So one of the other big things that that folks use Satellite for is configuration management. So the ability to be able to push config files out. Now in Satellite 5, I actually really liked the config file management in Satellite 5. It's not like, oh my gosh, amazing good, but it's good. And you've got some basic macro capabilities. But one of the limitations of the Satellite 5 config management is you're pushing an entire file. You may customize that file, but you're pushing the entire file out. Wouldn't it be cool if we had some sort of a configuration management tool that you could actually just go in and say, for an existing file, I only want to change this one section of it. Something like, oh, I don't know, Puppet? Just saying. So we actually use Puppet under the hood, and you can go through and do some really neat stuff with Puppet. You can do things like, I've got an example on here of, I'm going to go push a new ntp.conf file out, but I don't want to change all the drift and all the other settings. I just want to change my NTP server. So let me show you how we do that.
How many config management users are there here in the room?
Yeah, it's pretty common
About
use for
3/4,
Satellite
okay.
5.
Gotcha.
So for Satellite 5, guys, config file management's really easy, right? You go into the configuration tab and you drill down and you write your file, or maybe you import it or upload it or something like that. Here, it has the potential to be a lot more granular. With that granularity, frankly, there is some complexity. You're going to need to learn a little bit about the way that Puppet works. We are working to try to make that less Puppet-y, so that you don't have to figure out how to do, you know, Puppet modules and things like that. But let me show you how that works. So I'm going to go and I'm going to say I want to upload a Puppet module to manage the ntp.conf file. So it's a little bit odd the way that we do that. We're actually going to consider, we're going to install that Puppet module as a product. This sounds a little bit weird, but bear with me. It should make a little bit of sense in just a second. So gosh, we're doing that synchronization, so my satellite's running a little slow. Bear with me.
Yeah, good idea, Thomas.
Yeah, story of my life, baby. Live demo, yay! Yes.
So those views you created, they include the metadata to the errata.
Yes.
Okay, so then the other question is, when you register a client, it's entirely data, can you register to a view within that environment?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, that's our
Yes.
recommendation. So ultimately, the view is a filtered view of a repo, right? So ideally, your systems will all be looking at views. You know, even if you're not doing much, it's a good practice to go into that everything is going to be a view, even if it contains everything. And then ultimately, you can change those filters and have that system move to a different view that's complementary.
Wow, that's really hammering the system. Hang on just a second, guys. Did it time out while I was sitting there chatting? Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay. Content, products. Wake up, little machine. Oh, come on.
While it's doing that, can you restate the last statement about the Puppet inclusion?
Say again?
Can you restate your last statement about the Puppet inclusion? How the, you talked about installing Puppet modules.
Yeah. So the goal is to make configuration management as easy to use as it was in Satellite 5. Right now, it's not yet. Because you've got to understand Puppet concepts, and we actually use Puppet underneath a foreman, so you've got to understand, you know, software lifecycle ideas. You've got to understand the jointer of your environment, right? Dev, test, prod, with the content that you're going to be putting into it, like the RHEL operating system. It's actually a little bit cumbersome right now, or at least for me it was. You know, if you've already used Puppet for a long time, it's probably going to be like, oh, this is a piece of cake. But so the goal eventually is to have it so that instead of you having to go and figure out like what variables you're using that are Puppet related and understand Ruby, or actually not even Ruby syntax, DSL syntax for that environment, for you to be able to go in and say, I need my ntp.conf to look like this, and it'll figure this stuff out on the back end. So any ideas? Awesome. No. So for the content view, it looks like I've pretty much killed my satellite server.
Awesome.
Awesome. This is wonderful. All right. Well, it's running in a little VM on my laptop. There we go. Hang on a second.
Is there a consultant in the house?
Let me see where this is. Hang on, guys. Let's see if it'll tell me. So we need a cancel button, Mike. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. All right. Well, yeah. Shoot. Come on.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're setting up your sync relationship with hosted there.
Yep.
So if I've got multiple satellites in my environment, and I want one to be the master of my environment,
Yep.
then that same configuration of the
Inter-satellite sync?
yeah.
Yes.
So I can
Yeah, when you go in and you set up the synchronization, so you can actually set the URL. By default, it points at cdn.redhat.com, but you can point it at another satellite server.
What? So, that's not true, right?
Stay tuned. So the question was, what about those of us who use air-gapped disconnected satellites?
So so satellite out of the gate is going to be air gappable. So it's definitely disconnected. And as far as inter-satellite sync, there are probably some gaps we're still closing on that. Is that true, Mike? Between the synchronizing between satellites, or are we there?
You'll subscribe a downstream satellite to the environment. And import subscriptions, and you pull it from this environment. So it'll look like a consumer to the upstream.
Okay, so the statement is yes, we're going to have a process where you can synchronize between satellites, is the short answer. A couple months ago, we weren't quite there yet.
Shoot, okay. Yeah, so let me see if we can come back to that in a little while. Let's talk about something else. What's that? APIs.
All right, so let me talk a little bit about APIs. So in Satellite 5, how many here have used, say moderately use our APIs? How many use a lot of our APIs? Okay. So the APIs are changing, and this is one of the bigger changes that you kind of have to wrap your head around, is that with Satellite 5, it's XML RPC based, and Satellite 6 is going to be REST based. Now the concepts are the same. Some of the information coming back and forth, it's all conceptually the same, but it's going to require some retooling. And if you hear in the beginning of the talk, part of the reason that we're extending Satellite 5's lifecycle out is to give you guys time to examine how you're doing things. Do I even need to use these APIs to automate some stuff? And additionally, what will it take to refactor some of the scripting I've done. So Satellite 6 from the get-go has a zillion APIs. We are working towards, actually as part of our transition documentation, having a section just on APIs that are, we'll give examples. This is what you do in Satellite 5, this is how you do in Satellite 6, and give you examples so you can move forward. Unfortunately, there's no easy turn to flip a switch methodology to remap APIs. But they are there, and so if you're heavily automated, you can do the same with Satellite 6, but there is going to be some retooling you're going to have to do.
Something like Space Command would be more included?
Out of the gate, we got something like Space Command. So, what's it called? Is Hammer? Hammer is what it's called.
Hammer like Foreman.
Hammer like everything looks like a
Foreman, hammers. Yeah. Anyway, we're geeks, right? We gotta have some kind of connection. And this is not a 5.7. We are releasing a 5.7 later this year as well. And Space Command is slated to be supported in 5.7. All right, any more questions while they're retooling on the?
That's my satellite server in Austin, so we can use that if need be.
Yeah, so we have, it already is. So if you're familiar with the way, in the past you used to be able to get a certificate, you have to call support and get a certificate handed to you. Now that's all self-service through our portal. And like Thomas was saying earlier, he says, if you have multiple satellites or even multiple organizations within that satellite, you can say, I only want this organization to have 50 systems. I build a manifest that pulls down 50 of your subscriptions, put them in a manifest, and associates them to an organization. So it's much more, I think one of the most important tools that Red Hat has worked on in the past years is retooling our way of managing subscriptions and entitlements and giving you better tools to be able to slice and dice those and manage them over time.
Hey Todd, we're covering all the subscription management stuff tomorrow, Wednesday at 4:50. So if you're a lot of questions about the manifest, subscription management stuff, in terms of how that works, we'll be covering that, which will have carryover from Satellite 5, 6.
What time?
4:50.
4:50 tomorrow. Great talk on subscription management. And it's much cooler than it sounds. Candlepin, the underlying technology, is a great open source project. Please take a look at it. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
All
All right. So I got another satellite server in Austin that is not staged like the one that was on my laptop is, but it's functional. So we're going to play with that for a little while. So to upload a Puppet module, it's actually fairly straightforward. So again, you create a new product. I'll call it, you know, my Puppet module. I don't need to put any kind of sync plan or anything like that. I just click on Save. Once that comes up, now that I've got my product, just like if I have an operating system or if I have any kind of updates, I need to create a repository. There's two types of repositories that we can create.
Can I pause it for a second? The concept of a Puppet, or a product versus a repository. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of just briefly say what those are, the difference between the two?
Thought I just did. Okay. No. So, no, I'm kidding. Well, a product.
So ultimately, with Satellite 6, the concept of you have repositories and then you have products, which are essentially groups of repositories that you label as a thing. And so that gives you a way to conceptually organize this stuff in a much more sane manner.
Yeah, and you can do some really cool things with products, and I'll show you what those look like in a little while. But yeah, to his point, to Todd's point, the whole point here is that you can have multiple components that make up. There's a great example that Eric Jacobs, one of our solutions architects who's on the SME team for systems management, came up with. I may need to install a product like HP OpenView, but HP OpenView may have a whole bunch of dependencies that are part of the OS. So my product may be the HP OpenView packages, but then it also brings in stuff from the operating system. So I would put all of those together and call it one product. Now there'd be a repository for the HP OpenView bits and a repository for the operating system stuff. So yes, there is a distinction.
8 minutes.
What's that?
8 minutes.
Really?
Yes.
Whew. All right, 8 minutes. So I'm going to create a repository real quick. I'm going to call it my repo. Not very fancy. Now this is important. You got to click the drop down and say this is a Puppet repository, and that's all you need to do. So you click on the Puppet repository and save it. And I've got it, but you'll notice over here there are no modules. So I'm going to click on my repo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to browse for a module. And there's the Puppet Labs NTP module. Hey, Mike, where'd you download that? It's on my desktop. OK, so I'm going to upload that. And as I found out the hard way, it has a dependency. And I was trying to make it work and didn't have the dependency, and that got kind of ugly. So I'm going to browse to my desktop. And there should be the standard library Puppet module. Upload that. So now this repository has 2 modules. Once I've got that done, did I upload it? Yeah, okay, cool. So once I've got that done, I should be in good shape. All right. Cool. Now what I need to do, now that I've got these products, I need to promote them out into my environment. And the way that I do that is, again, I go into content views. So I can take that module, and this is kind of cool. I can actually create a content view that's as simple as just grabbing one of these things and promoting it. Or I can actually do composite content views. So I could actually say, use the rel components and then add in the other and go from there. So I'll go create a new view, my view, choose, I'm not going to do composite on this one, choose save. I can add in products, Puppet modules. So why is it not there? Oh yeah, because that's not what it is. All right, so I can add a new one, and there they are. They're my NTP in the standard library. So I'm going to add those guys. Select that version. Add that guy. And okay, we're good to go. Wait. Sorry. I got lost. There we go. Select version. All right, so they're both in there, and now I need to publish that version. So once I've published that, just like when I publish another content view, now I've got that published and it's promoting. Now, because it's only a couple of packages, it's super, super simple. It got promoted out. And then, oh, I don't have any hosts registered to this machine. Dang it. Or do I? Nope. Since that's a development machine in Austin, I don't have any hosts. Hey, there we go. Cool. All right, so this is the machine that's here on my local laptop, it seems like. Thank you. It seems like it's functioning a lot better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of drill down a little bit. I've already registered a machine, and I've subscribed it to the right content, or to the right environment. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to look at hosts. Maybe. There we go. There's host 10, which is another virtual machine on my laptop. So what I can do is I can go and edit this machine, and I can go look at the parameters, and you can see that I've subscribed it to the appropriate environment and content view. I can go look at the parameters that I can manage on this machine. And so there's one from that Puppet class, NTP. I can go through, and I can override that, and I can say, instead of clock.corp.redhat.com, let's say I want to change that to pool.ntp.org. Whoops. pool.ntp.org, and I submit that. And now, boot this thing up real quick, and actually we don't have enough time probably. I'm going to let this thing run. But basically at this point, what I'm going to do now is when that machine checks in next time and it runs Puppet, it's going to pull down that config. The beauty of the way that we do configuration file management in Satellite 6 is if you already have a heavily customized ntp.com for any of these config files, the neat thing is that unlike what we did with Satellite 5, where you just blow the whole thing down, Puppet is smart enough to preserve the existing file and only change that one setting that you had. Does that make sense? I mean, to me, that's very valuable. So again, we're running a little bit skinny on time. So I guess what I would say is I didn't get to cover everything that I wanted to today, but I think the main message that I want to get across is most of the concepts are going to be very similar between Satellite 5 and Satellite 6. The way that we do the things is totally different. We're using Foreman and we're using Chef, and Foreman and, what's that? Catello and I don't know where Chef came from. We're using a lot of different tooling, but I guess the big thing is definitely be aware that we're spending a lot of cycles trying to make sure that the transition is fairly straightforward. We're doing a lot to make sure that conceptually it should actually be, I think, more intuitive than Satellite 5 was. It's going to be a difference just because the UI is different and kind of the workflows are a little bit different. But at the end of the day, I think that what you're going to find is moving from 5 to 6 is not going to be painful. We're working hard from a business perspective to make sure that it's affordable, that you're not going to have to, buy 2 of anything. And, obviously, part of the Red Hat value is we've got training, we've got consulting, we've got documentation eventually. We've got, the support services and stuff like that. So.
Yep. Sure.
Yes.
Can you build a vanilla satellite if you didn't buy and throw into it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you just want to play with the content management for a while and until you get your arms wrapped around that, and you're just patching systems, to get your hand, that absolutely can do that. Puppet is as easy as hard as you want it to be. Puppet is not that hard. It really isn't. It just takes a little bit, just a little bit of learning curve on that. Also, like we were saying, we're trying to look at ways to make it easier, even ongoing, if you're a Puppet expert, to make it easier to say, I just want a simple template file, the key value pair thing, yeah. And make those kinds of concepts easier over time.
All right, so we're losing folks. Just out of curiosity, I usually ask this at the beginning, but I didn't in this case. Oh, I'm sorry, you go ahead, and then I'll ask at the end.
Yeah, so we essentially have the lab tomorrow and the subscription management session, and that's our last 2 satellite sessions for the week. So please, if you can attend, try to attend.
All right, cool. So I was just going to ask, a lot of you guys are already satellite users. How many folks, just out of curiosity, this is your first summit?
Ah, look at that.
Oh, wow. Okay, so thank you. First off, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. This is fantastic to have you here. For those of you who are veterans who have been here before, thank you for your continued support. I know I speak for Todd when I say we really appreciate you coming and spending the time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to post them through the application. If you liked today's session, make sure that you give us good feedback. If you didn't like it, just keep your opinion to yourself. All right, guys, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.